After the flood, 1957. The terror, which would not end for another 28 years if it ever did end, began, so far as I know or can tell, with a boat made from a sheet of newspaper floating down a gutter swollen with rain. The boat bobbed, listed, righted itself again, dived bravely through treacherous whirlpools, and continued on its way down Witcham Street toward the traffic light which marked the intersection of Witcham and Jackson. The 3 vertical lenses on all sides of the traffic light were dark this afternoon in the fall of 1957, and the houses were all dark too. There'd been a steady rain for a week now, and 2 days ago the winds had come and well. Most sections of Derry had lost their power then, and it was not back on yet. A small boy in a yellow slicker and red goloshes ran cheerfully along beside the newspaper boat. The rain had not stopped, but it was finally slackened. It tapped on the yellow hood of the boy's slicker, sounding to his ears like rain on a shed roof, a comfortable, almost cozy sound. The boy in his yellow slicker was George Denver. He was 6. His brother William, known to most of the kids at Derry Elementary School, and even to the teachers who would never have used the nickname to his face, as Stuttering Bill, was at home, hacking out the last of a nasty case of influenza. In that autumn of 1957, 8 months before the real horrors began, and the 28 years before the final showdown, Stuttering Bill was 10 years old. Bill had made the boat, beside which George now ran. He'd made it sitting up in bed, his back propped against a pile of pillows, while their mother played Fur-Elise on the piano in the parlor, and rain swept restlessly against his bedroom window. About 3/4 of the way down the block, as one headed toward the intersection and the dead traffic light, Witcham Street was blocked to motor traffic by smudge pots and 4 orange sawhorses. Stenciled across each of the horses was Derry Department of Public Works. Beyond them, the rain had spilled out gutters, clogged with branches and rocks and big sticky piles of autumn leaves. The water had first pried finger-holds in the paving, and then snatched whole greedy handfuls, and all of this by the 3rd day of the rains. By noon of the 4th day, big chunks of the street surface were boating through the intersection of Jackson and Witcham like miniature whitewater rafts. By that time, many people in Derry had begun to make nervous jokes about arcs. The Public Works Department had managed to keep Jackson Street open, but Witcham was impassable from the sawhorses all the way down to the center of town. But everyone agreed the worst was over. The Kenduskeag stream had crested just below its banks in the barrens, and bare inches below the concrete sides of the canal, which channeled it tightly as it passed through downtown. Right now, a gang of men, Zack Durnborough, George and Bill's father among them, were removing the sandbags they'd thrown up the day before with such panicky haste. Yesterday, overflow and expensive flood damage had seemed almost inevitable. God knew it had before. Flooding in 1931 had been a disaster which had cost millions of dollars and almost 24 lives. That was a long time ago, but there were still enough people around who remembered it to scare the rest. One of the flood victims had been found 28 miles east in Bucks Point. The fish had eaten this unfortunate gentleman's eyes, 3 of his fingers, his penis, and most of his left foot. Clutched in what remained of his hands had been a Ford steering wheel. Now, though the river was receding, and when the new Bangor Hydro Dam went in upstream, the river would cease to be a threat. Or so said Jack Jenborough, who worked for Bangor Hydroelectric. As for the rest, well, future floods could take care of themselves. The thing was to get through this one, get the power back on, and then to forget it. In Derry, such forgetting of tragedy and disaster was almost an art, as Bill Denborough would come to discover in the course of time. George paused just beyond the sawhorses at the edge of the deep ravine that had been cut through the tar surface of Witcham Street. The ravine ran on an almost exact diagonal. It ended at the far side of the street, roughly 40 feet farther down the hill from where he stood now, on the right. He laughed aloud, the sound of solitary, childish glee, a bright runner in that gray afternoon, as a vagary of flowing water took his paper boat into a scale model rapids which had been formed by a break in the tar. The urgent water had cut a channel which ran across the diagonal, and so his boat traveled from one side of Witcham Street to the other. the current carrying it so fast that George had to sprint to keep up with it. Water sprayed out from beneath his goloshes in muddy sheets. Their buckles made jolly jingling as George Denborough ran toward his strange death, and the feeling which filled him at that moment was clear and simple love for his brother Bill. Love, and a touch of regret that Bill couldn't be here to see this and be a part of it. Of course, he would try to describe it to Bill when he got home, but he knew he wouldn't be able to make Bill see it the way Bill would have been able to make him see it if their positions had been reversed. Bill was good at reading and writing, but even at his age, George was wise enough to know that it wasn't the only reason why Bill got all A's on his report cards or why his teachers liked his composition so well. Telling was only part of it. Bill was good at seeing. The boat nearly whistled along the diagonal channel, just a page torn from the classified section of the Derry News, but now George imagined it as a PT boat in a war movie, like the one they sometimes saw down at the Derry Theatre with Bill at Saturday matinees, a war picture with John Wayne fighting the Japs. How the newspaper boat threw sprays of water to either side as it rushed along, and it reached the gutter on the left side of Witcham Street. A fresh stream that rushed over the break in the tar at this point, creating a fairly large whirlpool, and it seemed to him that the boat must be swamped and capsized. It leaned alarmingly, and then George cheered as it righted itself, turned, and went racing on down toward the intersection. George sprinted to catch up. Over his head, a grim gust of October wind rattled the trees, now almost completely unburdened of their freight of colored leaves by the storm which had been this year a reaper of the most ruthless sort.